I'd like to call the General Business and Finance meeting of May 6, 2019 to order. I'd like to begin by reading a safety notice. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate council chambers to the nearest exit through the chamber doors and obey all instructions given by the clerk. If assistance is required, please see the clerk. Once you have evacuated the building, please gather in the front parking lot outside of Town Hall. Also, the Town of Lincoln Committee and Council meetings are posted on our YouTube channel. I'd like to thank the public for attending the meeting this evening. And I just want to remind everyone of our rules for engagement, to please be respectful while others are speaking, and to please refrain from clapping. Delegations will have 5 minutes to speak, and we are asked to stay on focus on the agenda item. I would like to ask everyone to please remember to silence all cellular devices. Roll call. We have all staff in attendance this evening. We have, to my left, CAO Mike Kirkopoulos, Councillor Paul McPherson, Councillor Mike Mikulik, Mayor Sandra Easton, Councillor Greg Reimer. To my right, we have Councillor J.D. Pachariva. We have regrets from Councillor Tony Bernay. We have Councillor Diane Regima and Councillor Adam Russell, or Deputy Mayor Adam Russell. Does anyone here have a declaration of interest to declare this evening? Seeing none. There are no statutory public meetings on the agenda. There are no delegations on the agenda. We have come to the consent portion of the agenda, which has 3 items. Item 6.1 FN-08-19 2018 Building Permit Fee Report. Item 6.2 FN-11-119 Financial Report Q1 of 2019. And item 6.3 AD-04-19 Connecting with Our Community, Review of 2018 Communication Activities. Would any member like to remove any of the items from the consent agenda to discuss? Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Chair Timmers. Yeah, I think there's some interesting things on all 3 that I'd like to see all 3 lifted.
Okay. Very good. So all 3 of these items will be placed at the bottom of our regular agenda in order. Okay. So we are now considering item 7.1 AD-06-19 Downtown Beamsville Business Improvement Area, BIA, 2019 budget and Board of Management for 2019 through 2022. And Paul Deaney will speak to this report.
Thank you, Chair, through you to the committee. This report this evening, as the councillors know, the BIA has recently gone through an expansion of their boundary area, increased their board of membership, and just at their board meeting in March approved a new budget for the 2019 year, as well as a new slate of candidates. So moving forward, this is the new process that the BIA will be conducting. In November of 2019, they will be coming back with the 2019 activities and 2020 work plan, as well as a 2020 budget. So this new report is the way that we're going to be moving forward to be approving their budget. So I look forward to any other additional questions this evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deaney. Are there any questions from council? Seeing none, we have a motion. Receive report AD-06-19 Downtown Beamsville Business Improvement Area, BIA, 2019 budget and Board of Management for 2019 to 2022, and approve the 2019 operating budget for the Downtown Beamsville Business Improvement Area, attached as Appendix A to report AD-06-19 in the amount of $120,000, and authorize the Director of Finance to incorporate the resulting BIA tax rates in the amount of $90,000 into the 2019 tax levy bylaw, and approve draft bylaw 2019-XX, appointing the Downtown Beamsville Business Improvement Area, BIA Board of Management for a 4-year term, 2019 to 2022, attached as Appendix C to Report AD-06-19. We require a mover to this motion, please. Mayor Easton? All those in favor? And that is carried. All those opposed? Seeing none. Sure, Councillor McPherson? Hang on one second.
Thank you, Chair Timmers. I just want to acknowledge Executive Director Stephanie Hicks and our Chair of the BIA Executive, Dr. Ray Darchie, are here in attendance to hear the result of this motion and of the bylaw. And I just want to acknowledge all of the work that both of these individuals did to get us to this point. So thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson. Mary Easton, I think I skipped over you there. My apologies on that.
That's quite all right. I didn't want to interrupt Councillor McPherson. Madam Chair, I would just like to acknowledge the process that we're experiencing here this evening. And I think this is having a member of staff review the external budgets beforehand and weigh them against the policies of the town and the current directions that council has set, I think is really a very good way to do this. And I believe that it is, I think that it provides the ABCs the opportunity to have that support from staff, but also know that their reports are going through with confidence. If there's any issues, that they can be addressed before they come to committee, which I think is a much more satisfactory way of doing it. And we can also have confidence that the budgets have been given a good look by staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary Easton. Okay, next on the agenda. We are now considering item 7.3 PW-14-19 Municipal Regional Provincial Gas Tax Sharing through Joint Canadian Urban Transit Association, CUDA, reporting. And I believe speaking to that, is that Angela? Oh, dear. Okay. Okay, I'm jumping ahead of myself here. Okay, let's back up one. We're now considering item 7.2 AD-07-19, Strategic Land Use. Next steps for Beamsville District Secondary School, BDSS Site Report. And our CAO, Mike Rokopoulos, will comment on that.
Thank you, Chair Timmers and members of committee. So we are here before you seeking direction to begin a conversation. I think it's important to highlight this is the start of a process. Just to give committee a little bit of background, especially for the new members of council that are around the table. We were before you in May of 2017, initially talking about the ARC process and specifically the Beamsville District Secondary School precinct and that particular property. Since that time, we've had I think some challenges with the property, and when I say we, I more mean the school board in terms of some of the land use issues in the new selection of a particular property. Those have taken the better part of the last 18 months to work themselves through, and that's why from a timing perspective, we are here before you. What we are seeking is direction, as I said, to begin a conversation with the school board to look at the potential strategic acquisition of this particular parcel. During the presentation that we presented back in May of 2017, we talked about 5 things in terms of being in front of council and why we were in front of you. One was the opportunity that was before us in terms of our own destiny, looking at strategically this particular property. Number 2 was just the due diligence that I think council and staff want to do when we are looking at properties, when we're looking at land acquisition, and when we're looking at creating our own destiny. Number 3 was the long-term maintenance of a heritage property. Last term, we had designated the initial portions of the Beamsville District Secondary School building a heritage property, and so looking at the long-term impacts of that. Of course, number 4, as I highlighted, is just strategic land use and how we should be looking at land and land acquisition. And number 5 was the continued look at service delivery and revenue generation. So at that point, we also highlighted, and I've reiterated that in this presentation and in this report that's in front of you, this is a multi-purpose site. We also looked at just the shifting tax burden and the number of properties within our holdings that we would be able to generate taxes from, and how we look at that from a long-term sustainability perspective. Of course, land use planning and looking at within an urban boundary context what properties are available. As I highlighted, of course, the building preservation from a heritage standpoint. And these are all things that I think present a unique opportunity for us. I've had at a very high level conversations with the District School Board of Niagara on this particular property. But as I said, today I am seeking direction from committee to, on a more formalized basis, start those conversations, and then of course report back to committee at the appropriate time once those conversations, I think, begin to materialize, and there's some more specifics around land costs and acquisition and timing and so forth.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from council? Councillor McPherson?
Thank you, Chair Timmers. So since we talked about this in the last term of council, of course, we're now looking at a new potential governance that may change the landscape. Does that, in your opinion, Mr. CAO, change anything for us in this process?
Through you, Chair Timmers, to the councillor. I think my short answer is no, it doesn't change the fact that I think strategically we should be looking at land and land acquisition. I think at that particular point in time, we talked about a couple of variables that were at play. One of them being the future use of this facility, which is in an industrial corridor, the shortage of industrial property, and the necessary renovations that this building is due for over the next number of years, and that we should be cognizant of investing in a building that requires substantial updates, substantial HVAC type issues, substantial roofing and structural changes before looking at all of our opportunities. I think should a governance review change the governance of Niagara region such that maybe as many facilities aren't needed without, I think, predisposing where that may go. I think we would still look at the strategic elements of acquiring this particular property, putting the right zonings in place, and then either working with the not-for-profit sector, working with other business interests potentially in this location, working with a whole slew of other key stakeholders. So from our perspective, I don't think it changes at all the direction we're going at as it relates to this particular property. It may change the end use, though, depending on what happens with that governance conversation over the next 6 months to a year.
That's good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Rajima?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So on page 2 of the report, once the school board deems the property surplus, the school board enters into a regulation to sell to preferred agencies wherein interested parties have 90 days to indicate interest. So the property has been deemed surplus, and when does this 90 days start? And another question through you, Madam Chair. Have we done any due diligence at this point, or this is really the very beginning?
Through to the CAO.
Through you, Chair Timmers, to the councillor. I'll answer the second part of that question first, and that is that right now is really the start of the process. Like I've said, I've had some informal conversations with the DSBN as well as others, specifically key stakeholders in the community, currently operating childcare centers and so forth. Community Care of West Niagara is another one that has reached out. So right now, it's, we're in that information gathering phase. The 90-day due diligence period actually starts 90 days before the school board vacates the property. And so the process works in such a fashion that should we reach a tentative agreement with the school board in the next month, 2 months, 6 months, whatever that duration looks like, that staff would then be able to put a conditional deal in front of both council and the board of the DSBN in terms of making this decision. And so the 90 days, while it's important, I think from an official standpoint, there can be provisional agreements made that put in place the 90-day stipulation that should the property become available 90 days before it's vacated, that here is the deal, here's the agreed upon price, here are the agreed upon closing dates and so forth. So that's tentatively how we're heading into this, Councilor Regima, in terms of what the negotiation will look like.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we have Mayor Easton.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Through you to the CAO, Mike, I'm interested in knowing how you plan to structure all the different elements of this when you come back to council. I remember when this building was purchased, Councillor Patriva may have been on council then, I can't recall. No, that far away, huh? Okay, well, I was just away, and there were, even with that exchange, there was one property waiting to be sold, which didn't sell for a number of years. And there were all of these conditional elements, which are always a little bit concerning when things don't quite turn out the way you want them to. So I did a little bit of homework on the risk elements of a project of this size. And I've, like you, I think we've probably all had people coming to us asking to have certain things put in the building or certain things not to be removed. How would we go about this so that at every step in as we go, council will know what those risks are and know how important they are, so that we can make those decisions as we go along, because it's not going to be so black and white. And at some point, we might be feeling a bit nervous, and I want to make sure that everything's nailed down. I think we all want that, because there's so many different parts to this. And there may be other property acquisitions. We don't know what will go on if we look at this from the big picture. So what would you have to say about that?
Through you, Chair Timmers, to the mayor. I think the approach we're going to take on this, and that I think we've taken on a number of other key projects, is really one that is based on good, sound project management principles. And so I think you're going to see us really create a project framework, a project charter, and start putting the necessary resources, both internally, and then if we need to come to council to seek additional resources in the way of consulting dollars and so forth, we'll be looking at that. I think it's slightly premature, but definitely something that I'm cognizant of looking at right now, something that is of this scope, that I think is of this importance, and the decisions that are before council. So everything from the business case analysis that we need to do, to cash flow, to how we're going to structure a deal like this, looking at the potential for swing space in terms of where we're going to house ourselves. Part of the business case, of course, is going to look at this particular property, and so I think we need to ensure that whatever negotiation we're having with whatever prospective buyer of this property, should that be something that is in the cards, that dates align, all the things that are necessary align. I can reassure council that the school board definitely wants to work with us, and did highlight as recently as last week that they will be as flexible as required with closing dates in order to help facilitate that cash flow conversation. And I think sometimes that's the piece that is often the most difficult. It is the cash flow piece of this, but we are definitely looking at a business case. We'll definitely be structuring this in an appropriate way as a project. I do anticipate, once we get this go ahead and what I anticipate being a more formal expression of interest from the school board to enter into this conversation with us, that I will then be coming back to council on a more regular basis, updating you on this, and I think having the conversation on how we're going to structure this project. No difference than, I think, some of the larger projects we're looking at in our community, whether they be Prudham's Landing and the development that's happening there and the team that's associated with that, or any other project that we've particularly undertaken. Definitely something also that all of SMT has a role to play in terms of the departments that are going to be, I think, keenly involved in looking at the outcome of this particular project.
Okay, and I have a second question, Madam Chair. What can we expect then? What can we expect as far as, I don't know how to state this. I guess we had a very good experience with Prudham's dealing with a secondary plan. And you talked about rezoning. So is this the kind of thing that you're talking about? And would a charrette model be, in your opinion, what is going to give the public the greatest satisfaction in dealing with an exciting project such as this?
Through you, Chair Timmers, to the mayor, absolutely. I think we've been talking with planning, and I've definitely mentioned it to the various counterparts that I've been talking to at the school board, that a secondary plan and the potential for cost sharing of that secondary plan with the school board is something that we would like to see. There has been, I think, some cautious agreement from the school board that they're willing to cost share that with the municipality. So that'll be something Kathleen and our planning department will facilitate and will work on. And absolutely, I think the success we've had with that design charrette process, where we engaged the community early and often in the process, I think helped get the buy-in that we required to get on a project that is of this scope. And so I anticipate a similar exercise that looks at engaging the community early in the process and having the necessary conversations in terms of what people envision in this particular location.
Right, great. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward.
Thank you. Next, we have Councillor Mikulik.
Thank you, Chair Timmers. Through you to the CAO, I'm excited that this has come before us. I think it's a great thing for us to take a stab at purchasing this property if available. And deals like this do take plenty of time. 90 days would not be enough to do an environmental. 90 days would not be enough to do a structural analysis or these sort of things. So to get on the ball early with this, I think is very prudent. I also think that we should take that serious stab at this, just because it's nice to be able to know what's going to happen in our backyard or within our downtown, and a valuable piece of real estate like this would be extremely important for us to consider and moving forward. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mikulik. I agree, this is exciting, and this is, tonight, we're discussing this, but this is just the very first step. And we're just getting our CAO to go forward and begin the conversation. Councillor McPherson? Oops. There you go.
Thank you, Chair Timmers, and just as we were discussing, so from a timeline standpoint, in the report, Mr. CEO, you talk about spring, summer 2019, and what will happen during that time. So DSBN has put a line in the sand that they're going to move in 2 years. So 2 years is our timelines, and obviously from the scope of what we saw in the Prudham's project, that's a very, very short period of time to be able to take on something of that magnitude. My question is, when do you expect to be back in front of us? Is that the fall of this year, or is that later, with a fulsome financial, everything that is involved in that project?
Through you, Chair Timmers, I probably anticipate through to the councillor coming back twice. One would definitely be earlier rather than later, and I would suggest in the summer, and that is to give council the semblance of what that secondary planning process may look like. I've yet to talk to Kathleen in terms of those timelines and yet to get official agreement from the school board that they would cost share that. But I anticipate that shouldn't take long. And I think depending on the type of conversation that we have with the school board and their willingness, I think the easy part will be to report back on my conversations. I'd like to then be back in front of you in the fall on the more detailed financial analysis piece. So anticipate coming back twice. Once really to give you I think a strong indication that they're on for an agreement and that they're on for an agreement with these criteria and some, timelines that I think we're able to gauge in a more official capacity. And then secondly would be the more detailed business case coming in the fall.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Next, I have Councillor Pachariva.
Thanks, Chair Timmers, for the opportunity. Thank you very much for this report. I look forward to the strategic policy that's going to come forward to outline this. We had an opportunity on a couple occasions to purchase, remnant school board properties, and the administration at that time felt it wasn't the way to go. But when you've got any opportunity to purchase land, and especially to help contribute to the revitalization of downtown, I look forward to this. And the number of strategic partners we have, the opportunity for a community hub, there's just too many things to ignore. So through you, Chair Timmers, to Mr. Garkopoulos, it's probably going to be like a series of dominoes that you'll be laying out to us. The involvement of the community partners, maybe it's acquisition of more land, maybe it's disposition of other lands to help pay for this. So, and Councilor McPherson said, the wheels will get moving shortly, so cost benefit coming back saying yay or nay, and then further going down with how we're going to attack this. Is that what we're looking forward to?
Through you, Chair Timmers, to Councillor Pachariva, that's absolutely correct, Councillor, and I'm appreciative that you brought up the community hub piece, because I didn't spend a lot of time talking about that in this particular report or in my preamble, but I think that is an important part of what we're looking at here. We're definitely looking at this particular property, and I think looking at it from a community hub perspective, looking at it in terms of the necessary services, both from a not-for-profit perspective, but also from a regional perspective as we look at better servicing our residents here in the context of West Niagara. I can tell you at a very preliminary level, we've reached out and had conversations with a number of agencies, everyone from sporting agencies to youth agencies, a very high-level conversation with even our healthcare partners here in Niagara in terms of what potentially could happen at that site. So I think there's some great opportunities from a community perspective, and there's a huge appeal to the school board from that perspective, and I think it bodes well in terms of that negotiation that we're about to embark with them in terms of what we're able to secure this property for. So those are all, I think, helpful elements. It's also incredibly helpful to have council support in these things, and I think that's been seen with the District School Board of Niagara throughout the entire ARC process.
Okay, and just to follow up too to that, if I may, Councillor Timmers, Councillor Michalak and I attended the Niagara Health Coalition presentation about 6 weeks ago, and there was interest from that group about being involved in some way, shape, or form. So I'm wondering how you might do a strategic outreach to the community to say, this is what we're contemplating. Are you going to do an ask to all potential parties, and what would your relationship be, or is that more? That's probably more operational than strategic at this point.
Through your Chair Timmers to the councillor, absolutely. I think right now we're not taking a proactive approach to seeking partners in that conversation. A number have read the articles, have seen the media attention, have heard members of council talking about it. And so I think right now we're getting a lot of interest, but we're getting it from people who have heard about it and who are aware of it. But definitely, I'll let Ms. Beattie speak to kind of the engagement piece and how we plan on kind of reaching out, because I think that's absolutely an important part, Councillor.
ahead,
Through
Ms.
you,
Beatty.
Councillor
Yep.
Timmers, to Councillor Patriva. So, sorry, just to clarify, are you talking specifically to the community hub piece or the whole BDSS district piece? The whole piece, okay, sure. So there's a couple elements in terms of reaching out. I mean, we have to ready the community for change. So doing that in a number of ways. We have to first, I think the important element is the business case, that more strategy, the larger one. Then from there, looking at who are those core stakeholders, and then looking at what are the methods that are best to sort of reach out to them. The community hub's kind of a whole different model. There's frameworks that are set up for that and how to determine who resides there, lives there. So that would be a different process that we would bring in front of council.
Okay. Thank you. Good, Counselor, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Beatty. Seeing no further discussion, we have a motion to receive and file the strategic land use and next steps for Beamsville District Secondary School, BDSS, site report AD-07-19, and direct the CAO to begin preliminary conversations with District School Board of Niagara, DSBN, regarding the BDSS property site and timelines, criteria and financials associated with any potential land acquisition, and report back by the end of Q3 2019. We require a mover. Councillor Pachariva, all those in favor? Those opposed? And that is carried. Thank you. Next, we are considering item 7.3. Now I'm back on track. I wanted to jump right to that one. I don't know why. 7.3, PW-14-19, Municipal and Regional Provincial Gas Tax Sharing through Joint Canadian Urban Transit Association, CUDA reporting. And I would turn that over to Mr. Graham. Did you have any comments, or to Angela Safani?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Angela and myself are here to answer any questions of the report. Maybe that would be
Okay,
best.
very good.
Thank you.
Are there any questions from council? Councillor McPherson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So looks to be pretty much a no-brainer as far as which way would we go. I guess the question I would have is there any risk? And maybe that's too big a question. Is there a risk that by the looks of it, it would go through the region, and then we would get our money through the region? Talk to me about that. Are these numbers ours? You know, that money is ours and we get the money, or is it at the discretion of the region?
Ms. Safani?
Through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor. Right now, based on the MOU that the region is drafting up, the money would be ours. If anything were going to be changed, I think the risk lies at the provincial level. If something changes significantly there where they say cut funding at 50%, then of course our
Right.
funding would be at risk as well.
Thank you. So as it stands right now, this is money in the bank, and we're going to gain substantially by working it through the region. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Next, we have Councillor Pachariva. You have a question?
I do, Chair Timmers, thank you. And through you, with respect to this increase in funding, it's for capital expenditures that increase transit ridership or improvements to security and passenger safety. Wondering if we've earmarked any of those improvements, capital improvements. I'm thinking of, driving to the meeting tonight, I'm seeing a person sitting outside on the bench in front of the Beamsville Medical Center on Ontario Street, and, thinking to myself, one way to increase ridership and improve security would be bus shelters. So wondering if that's on the radar this year, looking that we've got a potential of $40,000 this year, and wondering what our blue sky, if this goes through, what are our asks?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pachariva. Through to Mr. Graham.
Thank you, through Madam Chair. A good suggestion by Councillor Pachariva in terms of bus shelters. We are looking at some key higher, priority stops where a bus shelter would be a good investment. So that's something we are looking at for sure. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Seeing no other questions, we have a motion. Receive and file report PW-14-19, Municipal and Regional Provincial Gas Tax Sharing through Joint Canadian Urban Transit Association, CUDA, reporting. Agree in principle that Niagara Region report transit statistics in consolidation with the Town of Lincoln to maximize provincial gas tax PGT funding from MTO, and authorize staff to develop agreement terms in consultation with the Regional Municipality of Niagara outlining the framework for consolidated reporting and the PGT, as well as cost distribution between the Town of Lincoln and the Niagara region. We require a mover. Councillor Rajima. All those in favor? And that is carried. We are now considering 7.4 FN-08-19 2018 Building Permit Fee Report. And I have up Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in the report, I'm gonna combine, I have two questions, gonna combine them into one. I'm gonna try. So it says reserve funds are intended to be set aside to offset costs in years where building fee revenues are less than the cost of delivering the building service. And it also says in the report, we anticipate with the building permit applications in process and planning approvals in process and the timeliness we have, that our forecasted fees next year and the following few years will leave us in a surplus position. So I guess my question comes to, can those funds be used for anything other than the cost of our building? And if they can't, what happens down the road when we see a significant expansion of our building and our significant, as you say here, we've already collected $600,000 so far this year. What do we do with, does the money just sit, or what happens to the reserves over time? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McPherson. To Ms. Dale, if you could respond, please.
So through you, Madam Chair, in regards to the building permit reserve, there's legislation that says you can only use it for the cost of providing building services. So staffing, vehicle purchases, anything related to administering the building code. You can't use it for anything else. With building permits, you may collect money for a building permit in November of one year, but a lot of building permits, because from start to finish takes, average of, say, 6 months. You sometimes will collect a lot one year and not so much the next, but like the work flows like this, but the funding is like that. And so the idea behind it is you may have some years where you collect more, some years where you collect less. The idea is that over the long term, you're not supposed to carry a huge surplus. If you end up with a huge surplus, then you have to lower your building permit fees.
So that's the answer. I do get the, generally speaking, over time, you're gonna have, peaks and valleys. But when we look at the next 3 to 5 to 7 years in this town, we're gonna do a lot of building, and then it's gonna end. Generally, it's going to come to somewhat of a more normal level, right? So we're gonna have this huge, we're gonna have a bigger building reserve that I would think is going to put some pretty significant dollars away. So that, I think we need to know this, that may, in the very near future, drive our building costs, or our building charges down over a period of time. Fair to say?
Mr.
Through you,
Fanning?
Madam Chair. Yeah, to your point, Councillor, that is accurate. but I think also you have to consider where we are right now. So I think right now, we're pretty much at a break even for this current year, but then we do have a deficit that we are funding as well that's already in our reserve. So at the end of the year, we may not be sitting too badly. There are other municipalities that have millions of dollars in their reserve funds for those peaks and valley type years. So down the road, when we are in those valleys, we'll have the money available to fund those deficits. So we wouldn't want to be too hasty in reducing our fees, but of course be cognizant that we don't want to overcharge as well.
Okay,
Interesting.
good, Counselor?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Good questions. Very good questions. Anyone else? Seeing none? We have a motion to receive as information Report FN-08-19 regarding 2018 building permit fee report. I need a mover. Councillor McPherson, all those in favor? And that is carried. Next on the agenda, we are considering 7.5, FN-11-19, Financial Report for Q1 of 2019. And we have Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question on this report is with regards to the expenses related to winter control, salt and sand, that sort of thing. So as I understand it, we look at a 3-year average for our winter budget. And it appears in this report that we're looking at 1 year and talking about potentially falling into a deficit situation for the budget. Can we have the director speak to is it true that we look at a 3-year period and are we in reasonably good shape over the 3-year period?
Okay, thank you. Through to Ms. Safani, if you could.
Through you,
Respond.
Madam Chair, through the budget process, staff does look at the 3-year average to ensure that we are planning accordingly. And we do have those years where we do have higher usage, and then we do have those other years where we have lower usage. We do want to keep inflationary pressures going, like costs going, so we do adjust a little bit for that as well.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. We have Councillor Pachariva.
Thank you, Chair Timmers. Kind of along those same lines of inquiries, knowing that it's a fluid situation, knowing sometimes we're underspent, sometimes we're overspent, knowing that climatic change are going to have these peaks and valleys. Wouldn't it not be prudent now to establish a winter control reserve? That way we can draw from that reserve rather than trying to find it in other operations. I've kind of spoke to this a couple years and wondering, now that we're seeing this again in front of us in black and white, 95%, we're going to keep our fingers and toes crossed, hoping that there's no snow in October, November, December. It would give me a little sense of relief knowing I've got a little bit of money in the bank. So just curious on that.
Okay, through to Ms. Safani. Any
Through
comments?
you, Chair, to the councillor. Yes, that's a good idea, councillor. Of course, this year wouldn't be the year that we'll be putting dollars aside for it, but going forward, when we have those surplus dollars, that we can look at putting those aside into a reserve for sand and salt.
Excellent. And we've always got the potential for that 5%.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no other questions, we have a motion to receive as information Report FN-11-19, 2019 Quarter 1 Financial Report Highlights. Mary Easton, did you want to speak to that motion?
Well, I just wanted to make sure that, I just wanted to check through you with Councillor Pachariva about his suggestion. Is that going to be a direction in terms of the next budget process as we begin planning? Do we need to do that now, or have staff just taken it under advisement?
Mr. CAO?
through your Chair Timmers to the mayor, definitely something that staff can look at bringing back as part of the 2020 budget process and looking at some potential options for how we would fund that as well.
Okay, very
Great,
good.
that's fine, thank you very
That's
much.
good. Okay, thank you, Mary Stin. Do I need to read the motion again? No? I need a mover for that motion. Councillor Russell? All those in favor? And that is carried. We are now considering item 7.6, AD-04-19, Connecting with Our Community, Review of 2018 Communications Activities. And we have a question from Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Chair Timmers, and thank you to Ms. Beatty for the update, and very pleased to see making its way right to the top of the list of 2019 items is our Town of Lincoln e-newsletter. And maybe if we could get Carrie to talk about what you're thinking here, you know, what is maybe the content of that newsletter, how often, when do you think you're going to start, that sort of thing.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson. Through to Ms. Beatty.
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, I'm excited to really focus on this. We've been, first, before I start, can I just say, Leanne's here tonight, Persicini, and I just want to welcome her. I think most of council's met her, but I just really want to recognize Leanne for all of the significant work that she's provided this past year and how she's really enhanced our communications. So with that said, also a really important role in our e-newsletter. So we've been playing around with a few different platforms. I'm happy to say we've chosen the platform. We're going to go with MailChimp. There's lots of opportunity, plus we can expand, have different licenses. So we're looking at what we're going to be proposing, and I'm actually taking this to the senior management team on Wednesday, is that it's a quarterly newsletter organization-wise, but we'll do a monthly council update that'll review what's been reviewed at council and highlight all of the key reports that would be of great interest to the community. So it could be change, could be budget, et cetera. So that's what we're proposing, unless council has other feedback, which I'm open to, but that's what we're looking at this point. Once we build an audience for that particular newsletter, then we'll be looking at, we have a keen interest in doing an economic development newsletter that's specific to the business community, or others who would like to subscribe to that. So that will be our next one. And then we've got actually some social media activity that we're moving to kind of what we call the hub and spoke model. That'll be looking at community services playing a larger role in our social media presence as well as economic development. So those are sort of the key activities. We're looking at launching it in June. So we're just working on the design right now.
So just, and I have a couple of questions, just to that, Carrie. So are you sending it out via email, or are you just posting to the website?
Sure, through you, Madam Chair. So the format that, the great thing about MailChimp is that it'll manage a distribution list for us. So what we need to do is start to create that momentum of getting people to subscribe. We already have about 90 people on our subscriber list that they've subscribed through our website that I'm manually managing, and that's those emails that I send out. So MailChimp will go out through their email, but it'll be a very templated look versus an email message. So it'll have imagery with a teaser with a link to further content.
Okay. Thank you, and if I may, Madam Chair, so on the cost savings piece, there is a lot of, and Leanne is here, a lot of work being done, obviously, with graphics now. You know, when you look at the numbers that we're seeing here, you know, a quick bi-week look at this thing, we're spending 3.5 days in graphics, which quite honestly just blew me away, you know, that we would have that much demand for new graphics, you know, 3.5 days of every week, week after week after week after week, that we would be creating new graphics. So looking at the numbers, I don't dispute the numbers as you've got them listed here. What I'd like to see, though, is what did we spend on graphics prior to maybe Leanne getting here to say, okay, here's where we were, yet now I get that we're a much better, much more branded, communicator out to the community. But, to say, that we've saved X dollars is really, if only comparing it to if we went out and contracted somebody to do it. It's not compared really to, here's what we spent, and then here's what we're spending today. So if I could request that, and I don't expect you to know that tonight, but if I could see that. My question, is around the whole social media piece, and we're showing some pretty significant improvement in our numbers. My question is, do we have a target of how many followers we are looking for? And in our followers, do we know who they are? Do we know if they're coming from the town of Lincoln, if they're from elsewhere? Because I think what we're saying in our Twitter and in our Facebook is that this has been our major mode or major media to communicate out what's going on at Town Hall. So if we could answer the questions of how many followers in a town of 23,000 should we target, and then for our, I think we got now 1,300 or something in our Twitter account. How many of those are actual Lincoln residents? And again, it might not be something you have at your fingertips tonight, but I think those are important numbers for us.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McPherson.
Through you, Madam Chair. So to answer your first question, Councillor McPherson, so when I presented the business case to the senior management team to look at bringing a contract in-house creative services role, we did look at what the total outsourced cost was for 2016 and 17, and then what we had done to date in 2018. So recognizing that this organization's been in existence for 50 years next year, we've never had a dedicated communications role till the last 2.5 years. So I could only look at 2016, 17 when I came in to then look at what kind of strategy and tools and activities we had to be putting in place. So again, new to the organization in 16 and 17, we spent about 51,000, actually about 52,000. And then in 2018, in the first 3 months, we had spent 17,000. So you could see we were expanding that. If you look at 17,000, you're almost looking at almost to an 80 or 90,000 if we would have projected that. And again, that was looking at some of those basic things. I mean, what we're doing now is really supporting our 7 departments. And so from operational work, which is probably, I would say, 80% of our time, and then the 20% that's left is on sort of our foundational communication. So it's things like our vision, mission, and values, collateral. It is looking at, sort of our standardized media images. It's looking at a whole bunch of, so there's 2 ways of looking at it. So that's what the numbers were. So the business case at the time, again, looking at what that cost was to outsource and only getting that by project, whereas when you bring someone in-house, that service is dedicated to you 7 hours a day, 5 days a week. So it's hard to compare. They're a little bit of apple to oranges, but for the in-house versus external, but we were averaging about $150 per hour outsourcing, given the industry that's here in Niagara. So it was expensive. So if we were to subtract that, I mean, if I couldn't do it tonight, but by project and hours, we were probably getting a third, maybe even a quarter of the products that we're getting by having an in-house resource. So that's the first question. The second one, in terms of our social media, again, I can only look at the past 2 years. So what I'm looking at is so last year we had with Twitter an 80% increase in engagement. And with Facebook, we had, I think it was a 50% increase. So that was kind of my benchmark that I wanted to do better. We were only at about 44,000 this year for Facebook, or 44% increase. The challenge with that is we actually changed our model a little bit with Facebook engagement. So we've got events and ads that we're running more frequently we are posts. So those won't come up in the metrics that I'm looking at in terms of engagement. I have to do those differently, and I didn't calculate the event metrics for this. So that's why that's a little bit lower, but our Facebook engagement is still quite strong. So those are the benchmarks. There are social media benchmarks for government in general, and we'll be looking at those as we sort of establish a bit more. But right now, what I'm looking at is, am I consistently, making what we are last year with a little bit more, and looking at about 10 to 20% of our population. So I'd like to be up around the 2,000. And in terms of the quality of the followers that we have, I can only anecdotally answer that right now, but it is, so Twitter is more of a business and organization following, and then obviously Facebook is an individual following, and that's a significant mix for Facebook, but they are very focused to Lincoln or Niagara in general, anecdotally, but I'd have to go through. You always have sort of your odd individual that's following, that's just trying to gain traction for their own marketing purposes, but we tend to see those either unfollow or unlike us after a while because they don't get the traction they're looking for.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Anyone else? Councillor Pachariva?
Thank you, Chair Timmers. Couple questions with respect to kind of next steps, I guess. So I like the fact that we're coming out with a quarterly newsletter with some monthly happenings. We got the email last week from Ms. McKay about the remnant piece of sidewalk installation at Meadowood Park, the updates to Charles Daly Park, driven by Active Transportation, and citizen inquiries. So having that vehicle carry, I think, will be dynamite to then further get that out and tell that story that, you know what, if you see something, you can make a difference and tie it back into that place to grow, a place to live, a place to belong. It's about ownership. It's about, you know what, you can make a change. You can make a difference. So I really like that. Curious, and Councillor Bernay had brought this up at a couple of the events. Any inkling to maybe having and I don't know whether the town can have a LinkedIn page, but a LinkedIn presence. A lot of business people aren't on the conventional Facebook or Twitter. They use LinkedIn. Any thoughts of using that, or can you do a municipal page?
Through you, Madam Chair, I believe the Town of Lincoln does have a LinkedIn page, but it's through our Human Resources Coordinator. I'd have to verify that, and it would be used solely for recruitment and advertising the role, because it's really more about job recruitment and employment versus sort of business activity, but it's certainly something I can take away, Councillor.
Okay, yeah, because I get a lot of business activity events coming through that. There's a lot of professionals that use that. Another question with respect, I mean, this is great with the cost savings on creative services. Are you looking to bring in-house the Parks and Rec publication? So rather than subbing that out, are we looking to take that on? And it doesn't have to be, in the short term, maybe long term. Maybe that's a future goal as you get more comfortable.
Sure, through you, Madam Chair. I am pleased to say that the last 2 editions have been designed by Leanne, so we have moved that product in-house. That's why it's looking as fabulous as it does. And what we are still outsourcing, though, Councillor, is the advertising aspect for the cost recovery. It is a huge responsibility and quite a large undertaking to seek all that advertising. So we just issued, we had an RFQ for the past 2 issues, and we're just about to issue a request for quote as well for the fall, winter.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I have Mayor Easton.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm very sorry, Madam Chair, but this is such an important report, and I'd like to ask through you for Ms. Beattie to come up here, because this is really quite a substantial report, and I can't see her.
Okay. Ms. Beattie?
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Carrie, I wanted to be able to tell you, so that when I could see you, that I was looking at the quality of what had been produced this year and the consistency of the material and a lot of the images. There's a relationship. Everything hangs very nicely together. And I think that tremendous progress has been made. And I began to think about whether or not the quality was more than we could afford. So I was very relieved to see your numbers, because it really is generating a lot of very positive comments. So I wanted to tell you that first. Secondly, through you, Madam Chair, I do have a question about, in terms of the messaging in booklets or brochures, is there a clear understanding that these messages come from council, whether it's the Lincoln Playbooks or whatever it is, that these booklets and all the messages are messages of council?
Through you, Madam Chair, to the Mayor. Mayor, we try to do that. As you know, in Play Lincoln, the introductory message right there is from Mayor. Our most recent, the ActDev summary, has a really great message from council. So we try to always reinforce at the beginning of all of this the investment that council's making in any of the initiatives. So we try to get that message across.
Good, okay. What would be helpful, Madam Chair, is in regard to the social media piece. We've never really had orientation around the media. We could probably have Luke come in and give us his rendition, but what additional education would be available for council? Because I'll talk a little bit about the newsletter, but the other social media pieces where we can reinforce part and parcel of decisions on an ongoing basis. Is there any plan to review some of those pieces with us? What's out there for us to become more skilled at that?
Through you, Madam
Go
Chair,
ahead.
to the Mayor. When I was before you at council orientation, I did speak significantly about the important role that council can play, especially in digital media, so over social media, as well as, kind of establishing your own way of communicating with your constituents. So I'm happy to help with that, but I'm also happy to bring someone in for a council workshop if that would be something that you'd be interested in as well. It's really, I'm up to either, but I'm always available. I'm happy to meet with any counselor to help look at how can we better strategize around the social media presence, how you can communicate decisions effectively, highlight the really important and relevant things to the community, get them out to events for decision-making and public policy. I'm happy to do that. So, or as I said, I'm happy to also bring in someone from external to do a workshop as well.
Okay, well, I'll leave it with you, Madam Chair, to sort that out so that it can come up in the future. I'm curious to know what other options there are with the newsletter. Are we going to also send the newsletter out door to door? Because there are so many people that still don't have internet access or don't have computers. What is the plan to do that? And I'm also speaking about those people that live on any streets that border other municipalities who don't ever receive municipal mail.
Through you, Madam
ahead.
Chair, to the Mayor. I'd probably ask that I could take that away for consideration. There is a significant cost to do mail-outs to our entire community, so we'd need to really look at, I'd probably like to reach out to some other communities that are similar to us and look at if they've done it, what was the return on investment. I agree there's an importance of getting something hard copy out, but maybe looking at other avenues of doing op-eds in our local papers on a more regular basis. There could be other options that would be a bit more cost efficient, but you're looking for Lincoln, just based on some of my experience with the ward notices that we put out in hard copy, you're probably looking at almost $20,000 a newsletter to get out to the entire community with the fees that are associated with Canada Post and the actual printing.
Okay, Madam Chair, I understand that. It's a bit difficult to speak about equality and a sense of belonging when you're when only some people are being given consideration. But I would just like to reinforce that the people that are citizens that live in those, on those border streets and roads, they don't get the newspapers either. There aren't deliveries to them. So they are really quite cut off, and it is becoming an increasingly it's a big problem for them. There are many, many complaints. We all get them, I'm sure. So I would appreciate it if that would be looked into. Otherwise, it'll just become another situation of the haves and the have-nots. So we really should try and avoid that. But we have come a long way in, is it really 2 years since we started down this journey? So there's been a huge amount accomplished, and the quality of the work is really outstanding. And it's good to know that it's manageable from a cost-effective perspective. People do appreciate it. I certainly get a lot of comments. So thank you very much for that. And I look forward to some of these other elements becoming more, fleshing out more. It's really in our best interest to continue on with this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Easton. Next, I have Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, just a quick comment, maybe suggestion. Would it not be possible to piggyback off our municipal tax bills? And we're already sending out a letter through the post office. Could we not just stuff the newsletter in with that on a quarterly or semi-annual basis? I know in another jurisdiction that we have a property, that's how it's done, and I know we read it ad nauseum when we get it, so.
That's a good suggestion.
Through
Ms.
you,
Beattie?
Councillor, sorry, through you, Chair Timmers, to Councillor Russell, I'll take that back to look at the cost limit. So we can do that. There is still a cost. It's not as significant as mailing directly, like if we piggyback. But there's mixed reviews on whether people are reading any type of insert that goes with their bills. So we just need to look at, again, I'll look at all the different opportunities and bring that back for probably through an information, just an email through to all of you about the different options and the costs associated.
Thank you, Councillor. And next I have Councillor Mikulik.
Thank you, Chair Timmers, through you to Carrie. Ms. Beattie, I see that we have a presence on 610. We have a presence on CHCH. Do we reach out to the broader listening or viewing TV audience in respect to marketing our town or promoting our town when it comes to various events or anything for that matter?
Through you, Chair Timmers, to Councillor Mikulik. So I guess for me to understand, so our media market sort of is we only have one TV broadcast, which is CHCH. So we also have our community cable channel through formerly Cogeco, but now YourTV. So it really would depend on the message. When you're looking at promoting sort of the return for a tax dollar, our program services engagement, we're really looking at our audience, so we would not really be extending it to the broader media market. Now, further to a tourism strategy being conducted and outcomes from that, then that changes your whole direction in terms of marketing. But at this time, I wouldn't recommend, typically because it's not the audience that we're looking for.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I don't see anyone else in the queue, so I'll just add a couple of comments. I think this is a fabulous report, and it is impressive. You know, it has only been 2.5 years, and I feel that we've accomplished a huge amount of work. And when I go through it, the social media is, you know, the numbers here are they're climbing. You know, and I think it's really incredible that you've got that kind of following already in such a short period of time. We see the creative design, the savings, the quality of work, as the mayor said, the quality of work that's going out. I'm just blown away. I'm really happy with it, and I love the imaging. It's just, we're getting there, and I feel like we're finally really getting it out there. We're engaging the community, and it shows. And it's showing at a very high level, and it's very professional. And yeah, I think this is a fabulous report. And I'm looking forward to the next year. So we just keep going. And I love this kind of reporting. I like the way that you put it out. It's very easy to follow. Just the website hits. I found that really interesting. You know, the number of hits, like what pages are people looking at? I know the home, it was probably me 10,000 times, but but I think that's great. I think it's great. Like, look at Ulink. 4,400 people checked out the Ulink page. Like that, this is fabulous. Like, I love this. You know, this really tells a story. And the equivalent to reading the content of 700 novels. Like this is really, we're getting out there. And I just wanted to add one other thing. When I was doing the interviewing for the, one of the committees, and I think we interviewed, I'm not sure exactly, 13 or 14 people, and we asked them what they knew about the town and the services that we provide. And the number one thing that every single one of them said was Ulink. So, I mean, we're getting it out there. Like, we're doing a great job, so, anyway, thank you. Absolutely.
So, sorry, I should have mentioned that on that note. So thank you for highlighting the website. So I don't know if council noticed that 4 of the 10 top pages last year were related to election, which shows a really engaged community in our municipal election. And I was really proud to see that. And so I didn't highlight that in the highlights, and I missed that. I'm sorry. But tonight I wanted to make a point of saying that because I think that's a really, you won't see that in other municipalities. It's not a common trend. So this is, I thought, was really significant that, you know, basically 2/3 of our visitors were related to municipal elections last year.
I found that really interesting as well, and it certainly shows that people are becoming more and more engaged. So, anyway, oh, I have Mary Easton next.
Well, Madam Chair, I just wanted to thank Carrie for coming up, but I really feel that this is such an important report, and it is such a professional report and a professional dimension to what we're doing now that it would be a shame not to be able to have a conversation with you, because it really is a lot of work on your part and Lindsay's part. Yeah, thank you very much.
I agree. Thank you, Mary Easton. Thank you, Ms. Beatty. So seeing no further discussion, we have a motion to receive and file the Connecting with Our Community 2018 Review of Communications, Outreach Activities, and Infographic attached as Appendix A to Report AD-04-19. I require a mover. Councillor Reimer. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. We have no confidential items. Do we have any staff remarks? Seeing none. Being no further business, I call this meeting. Oh, are there any committee remarks? Seeing none. There being no further business, I call this meeting adjourned at 7:12. Thank you, everyone.